No wind today, might as well make a tutorial. Let's start at the beginning. So you maybe did your first windsurfing lessons and are now looking into buying your own first gear. And I know as a beginner it can be really tough to sort through all the different gear that's out there and figure out which of this gear is actually best to start out windsurfing. So today I want to try to help you a little bit understand better what you will need as a beginner to make the fastest progress and have the most fun on the water from the start. So first, when sorting through all the different gear out there, you have to understand that there are several different forms or disciplines in windsurfing, and each of those differ a lot. So for starters, first there's wave windsurfing, where the gear is really small and easy to turn and very easy to handle with still some power, so that you can control the turns in the waves and get the best acceleration in your jumps. Then there is freestyle, which is the discipline for flat water, where you want to do tricks with zero waves basically, and the gear here is opted for maximum power so that you have a lot of power for doing your tricks, and also lots of handling so that the sail and board don't get in the way when doing your tricks on the water. Then there is slalom gear, which is like the Ferrari under the windsurfing gear, because it's opted to go as fast as possible on a reach and in a jibe. And for that there's very little volume in the nose of the boards, and these boards are really not suited for beginner windsurfers. And last but not least, there's speed windsurfing gear, the discipline I mainly do. And this gear is similar to slalom gear, but the boards are much tinier with lots less volume. And yeah, this gear is even less suited for beginners with a tiny volume in the boards, and is very hard to ride. You need years of experience to ride that. So any of those disciplines you shouldn't be looking into as a beginner. You need like an all-round board. Each of these disciplines, the gear is already opted for special circumstances and special conditions, and as a beginner you just want the easiest gear possible. So do not go for either of those disciplines in the beginning. What you should be looking for are beginner boards or freeride boards, which are also sometimes classified as free move boards. So really the main thing that will help you out as a beginner is to be looking for a board that is very stable and allows you to stay on a stable platform while learning, so that you don't fall into the water as often and make progress much quicker. And for that purpose you should add around 40 to 50 liters of volume to your body weight. So for example, I'm 85 kilograms, so if I were a beginner I should be looking for a board that has at least 125, better 135 liters and more. So that's like the minimum. Basically the higher you go here, the more stable the board will be and the easier it will be to learn. But you also have to keep in mind that if you buy a really big board, you might quickly, let's say, grow out of the board and get tired of the board. So that's also a thing to consider, but more on that later. The other main thing you should mainly be looking for when starting to windsurf and getting your first gear is the width of the board, because a wide board also gives a lot of stability. So for this purpose, yeah, I would really advise to be looking for a board with at least 80 centimeters of width, because that way you will not get this much movement in this axis of the board, and in turn again make progress on the board much quicker. Later on you can move down to smaller boards, but when starting out it's really important that you have a stable platform to learn windsurfing on and get the most fun out of it from the start. In my personal opinion, the goal should always be, when starting out to windsurf, to buy gear that allows you to make as much progress as possible, so that you can get to this planing phase in the shortest amount of time possible. Because to be honest guys, the first time you start planing on a windsurf board is the moment that will get you hooked. Everything before that is fun, but once you hit that milestone, it really is a milestone. It takes a really long time to learn it, but once you hit that milestone, you will be instantly hooked to windsurfing, I promise. And I think the main reason why a lot of windsurfers try windsurfing at some point and never continue is because they never get to that planing phase. And yeah, so in my opinion, the goal should be to get planing as quickly as possible, and for that reason make it as easy as possible with your first gear to get there. Oh, and by the way guys, if you're new here, I'm making regular windsurfing videos. I do vlogs, I do tutorials, travel videos and all that good stuff. And I'm just shy of 5,000 subscribers at the moment, so I would really love to get there with your help. So if you're new here, I would really appreciate your subscription, but let's get back to topic. Alright, to see which gear is best for you, you basically have to check your own level of windsurfing before making your first purchase. And yeah, let's say you're a complete beginner, you've never done a windsurfing course, you've never stood on a windsurfing board. In that case, I would really advise you to go up with the volume there. Maybe be looking forward to buy something in the maybe 180 to even 200 liter range. That way you will have the most stable platform to be learning windsurfing on. You fall into the water less and it will be a much nicer experience. On the other hand, if you've already maybe done your first windsurfing lessons, maybe on vacation or something, you can be looking forward to buy something with a little bit less volume and maybe like even a freeride board instead of a total beginner board. And yeah, that way you will have a board that you will enjoy for much longer because you can make progression on it much longer and maybe even get to your first planing runs with this board. So that way you will not need to buy a new board as quickly. And yeah, if you are a total beginner, in my opinion, it might be a good idea to do a couple of lessons first and see if windsurfing even is a sport that you might enjoy. And that way, if you do buy your first gear, you don't need to buy the complete beginner board, but can buy something that you will have fun with much longer and can progress with much longer. But that's just my personal opinion. Take it for what it is and do whatever you want, of course. Alright, then I have to talk about something that really pisses me off sometimes. And yeah, as a beginner, it can be really hard to be looking through all the different gear out there on all the marketplaces, and it's also quite pricey, let's be honest. And then you see like these offers of complete kits with maybe even a couple of different sales, and they are really cheap, maybe like €100 or something like that, but the gear is really old. So is that gear still good? And the answer is yes and no. If you do know how to windsurf, like myself, I can have fun on that gear. I can go on it and think like, oh yeah, nice, that's what windsurfing was like 30 years ago. But as a total beginner, understand this, like the boards back then were really long and very narrow, and as we've said before, the wider board will give you a much nicer platform to learn windsurfing on. And so yeah, the thing is that these boards are really not ideal for beginners as they are really not stable. And another factor is that this gear is very heavy sometimes because the masts back then were heavier, the sails were heavier, everything was heavier. So it's much harder to learn windsurfing on. So my advice is stay away from these offers because you will make progression much quicker on newer gear. Like, of course you can buy gear that is like a couple years old and much cheaper, but don't be looking forward to buying gear that's like 30, 40 years old. That's just my take on things. And yeah, I basically did that mistake myself back then. Because when I was like 12, 13, my dad had all this old windsurfing gear from like the 80s and 90s. And yeah, I tried windsurfing on that several times when I was like 12, 13, 15, but I never got the hook of it because the gear was too heavy and not stable enough for me. And it was only when I was like 18 that I bought my first own windsurfing gear, which was newer gear, a wider board. And instantly I was hooked because it was so much more fun. I could get planing pretty quickly. And yeah, I think this old gear just prevented me back then from having too much fun with windsurfing. So don't be making that mistake. That's just something I wanted to add because I think it's important to let people know that these old offers are maybe not the best thing for beginners. Alright, that's pretty much it for today's video. Yeah, if you haven't already, subscribe. I'm gonna do a lot more of these tutorials because I want to do like a whole series from beginner to winner and like show every step of the way in windsurfing, every maneuver, everything you need to learn. And also, if you need any personal advice, I do work for an online windsurfing shop in Germany, and you can always write me an email here at nils@windlounge.de, and I will help you out with any questions you might have. Even if you don't really want to buy anything and just need like some advice, just write me there and I will try to help you out. Alright, still no wind. What am I going to do? Maybe go for a run or edit this video. See you in the next one. Bye.